If you're elected president, what are you going to do to convince factories to keep the jobs here in the United States instead of sending them overseas to other countries?
Secretary Clinton?
I'm going to do what I think will work, which is both carrots and sticks. And let me talk about the carrots. We're going to have a very clear set of proposals and incentives for manufacturing so that we change the way that companies think about making investments again in America. I have a comprehensive manufacturing plan that I will be implementing. We're also going to invest more in infrastructure, as we both have said. It's woefully under-resourced. That will put a lot of people to work. I want to do more to help small businesses. They are the source of 2/3 of our jobs. We've got to help them start and grow, particularly minority and women-owned small businesses. We need to do more to help create clean energy as a source of good jobs. But I'm also going to go after companies. You know, when a company decides to leave, like Nabisco is leaving, and they've gotten tax benefits from Chicago and Illinois to stay there, I'm going to claw back those benefits. They're going to have to pay them back if they're leaving a place that actually invested in them. I'm also going to go after companies like Johnson Controls in Wisconsin. They came and got part of the bailout because they were an auto parts supplier. Now they want to move some of their headquarters to Europe. They're going to have to pay an exit fee. We're going to stop this kind of job exporting, and we're going to start importing and growing jobs again in our country.
Senator Sanders, I'll let you. Yeah,
I am very glad, Anderson, that Secretary Clinton has discovered religion on this issue. But it's a little bit too late. Secretary Clinton supported virtually every one of these disastrous trade agreements written by corporate America. NAFTA, supported by the Secretary, cost us 800,000 jobs nationwide, tens of thousands of jobs in the Midwest. Permanent normal trade relations with China cost us millions of jobs. Look, I was on a picket line in the early 1990s against NAFTA because you didn't need a PhD in economics to understand that American workers should not be forced to compete against people in Mexico making 25 cents an hour. And the reason that I was one of the first, not one of the last, to be in opposition to the TPP is that American workers should not be forced to compete against people in Vietnam today making a minimum wage of 65 cents an hour. Look, what we have got to do is tell corporate America that they cannot continue to shut down. We've lost 60,000 factories since 2001. They're going to start having to, if I'm president, invest in this country, not in China, not in Mexico.
Secretary Clinton.
Well, I'll tell you something else that Senator Sanders was against. He was against the auto bailout. In January of 2009, President-elect Obama asked everybody in the Congress to vote for the bailout. The money was there and had to be released in order to save the American auto industry and 4 million jobs, and to begin the restructuring. We just had the best year that the auto industry has had in a long time. I voted to save the auto industry. He voted against the money that ended up saving the auto industry. I think that is a pretty big difference.
Well, if you are talking about the Wall Street bailout, where some of your friends destroyed this economy,
you know.
Excuse me, I'm talking.
Let him respond.
If you're going to talk, tell the whole story, Senator
Let
Sanders.
me tell my story, you tell yours.
I will.
Your story is for voting for every disastrous trade agreement and voting for corporate America. Did I vote against the Wall Street bailout? When billionaires on Wall Street destroyed this economy, they went to Congress and they said, oh, please, we'll be good boys, bail us out. You know what I said? I said, let the billionaires themselves bail out Wall Street. Shouldn't be the middle class of this country.
Okay.
No, wait a minute. Wait, can I finish? You'll have your turn. All right. But ultimately, if you look at our records, I stood up to corporate America time and time again. I went to Mexico. I saw the lives of people who are working in American factories and making 25 cents an hour. I understood that these trade agreements were going to destroy the middle class of this country. I led the fight against us. That is one of the major differences that we have.
Well, if I could, to set the record straight, I voted against the only multinational trade agreement that came before me when I was in the Senate. It was called CAFTA. I came out against the TPP. After it was finished, I thought it was reasonable to actually know what was in it before I opposed it. I oppose it. Now, let me get back to what happened in January of 2009. The Bush administration negotiated the deal. Were there things in it that I didn't like? Would I have done it differently? Absolutely. But was the auto bailout money in it? The $350 billion that was needed to begin the restructuring of the auto industry? Yes, it was. So when I talk about Senator Sanders being a one-issue candidate, I mean very clearly, you have to make hard choices when you're in positions of responsibility. The two senators from Michigan stood on the floor and said, we have to get this money released. I went with them, and I went with Barack Obama. You did not. If everybody had voted the way he did, I believe the auto industry would have collapsed, taking 4 million jobs with it.
Senator Sanders?
I believe that the recklessness, the greed, and the illegal behavior of Wall Street drove this country into the worst economic downturn in the history of the modern history of the United States of America. And I will be damned if it was the working people of this country who had to bail out the crooks on Wall Street. And what I proposed, and I had an amendment that was defeated by a voice vote on the floor of the Senate that said to those people on the top who benefited from Wall Street greed, I said, you pay for the bailout. Don't go to my constituents who are struggling to make ends meet. In terms of the auto bailout, of course that made sense. In terms of the stimulus package, of course that made sense, and I strongly supported President Obama's position on that. But let us be clear. One of the major issues, Secretary Clinton says I'm a one-issue person. Well, I guess so. My one issue is trying to rebuild a disappearing middle class. That's my one issue.
Senator Sanders.
All I can say is that given the terrible pressures that the auto industry was under, and that the middle class of this state and Ohio and Indiana and Illinois and Wisconsin and Missouri and other places in the Midwest were facing, I think it was the right decision to heed what President-elect Obama asked us to do. He sent a letter, an authorized letter, asking us to support that, to save the auto industry. Yeah, were there things in it that you and I would not have necessarily wanted? That's true. But when it came down to it, you were either for saving the auto industry or you were against it. I voted to save the auto industry, and I am very glad that I did.
Let me just say this. While we're on Wall Street, one of us has a super PAC. One of us has raised $15 million from Wall Street for that super PAC. One of us has given speeches on Wall Street for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, I kind of think if you get paid a couple of $100,000 for a speech, must be a great speech. I think we should release it and let the American people see what that transcript was.
And I have said, and I will say again, I'll be happy to release anything I have as long as everybody else does too. Because what really is behind that question, Republicans and Democrats, is whether I can stand up to Wall Street. Well, let's have some facts instead of some rhetoric for a change. I went to Wall Street when I was a United States Senator. I told them that they were wrecking the economy. I asked for a moratorium on foreclosures. I asked that we do more to try to prevent what I worried was going to happen. I also called for closing loopholes, including the carried interest loophole. I also called for changes in CEO pay. I have a record. And you know what? If you were going to be in some way distrusted or dismissed about whether you can take on Wall Street if you ever took money, President Obama took more money from Wall Street in the 2008 campaign than anybody ever had. And when it came time to stand up to Wall Street, he passed and signed the toughest regulation since the Great Depression.
Senator Sanders, let me just follow up with you. You'll be able to follow
up.
Senator Sanders, just yesterday, in fact, you said, I believe it was yesterday, you said not only her speech must have been a fantastic speech, it must have been a Shakespearean speech for that amount of money. Is her answer enough for you that she'll release it when all the Republicans and Democrats release it?
Everybody else to release it. Well, I'm your Democratic opponent. I release it. Here it is. There ain't nothing. I don't give speeches to Wall Street for hundreds of thousands of dollars. You got it. Second of all, when we talk about being tough on Wall Street, and this really galls me and the American people. Recently, Goldman Sachs, among many other major financial institutions on Wall Street, as you know, reached a settlement with the federal government for $5 billion because they were selling worthless packages of subprime mortgages. $5 billion settlement. You know how many people, executives on Wall Street, have gone to jail? If you're a kid caught with marijuana in Michigan, you get a police record. If you're an executive on Wall Street that destroys the American economy, pay a $5 billion fine, no police record. If I'm elected president, we're going to bring justice back to a broken criminal justice system.
Secretary Clinton?
Well, I think we are in vigorous agreement on this. I have said repeatedly, no bank is too big to fail, no executive too powerful to jail, and I have said that I would use the tools in the Dodd-Frank regulations that if any bank posed a systemic risk to the economy, they would be broken up. Because we now have tools, laws, that we didn't have before. And I am very happy we did, because there does need to be accountability, including criminal accountability if it is called for.
Senator Sanders, I just want to show the audience, you sent a tweet. I want to return to trade. You sent a tweet on Thursday. This is the tweet. I'm showing it to the viewers. It said, "The people of Detroit know the real costs of Hillary Clinton's free trade policies." It shows pictures of crumbling buildings. It seems like you're blaming her for the situation in Detroit.
I am blaming the trade policies. You know, this is an amazing thing, which I didn't know until recently. And I wonder how many people did know this.
But you're calling them Hillary Clinton's free trade policies.
Well, Hillary Clinton and everybody else who supported these disastrous trade policies, she wasn't alone. We had many, many Republicans and far too many Democrats who supported these disastrous trade policies. Do you know that in 1960, Detroit, Michigan was one of the wealthiest cities in America? Flint, Michigan was a prosperous city. But then what happened is corporate America said, why do I want to pay somebody in Michigan a living wage when I could pay slave wages in Mexico or China? We're going to shut down. We're going to move abroad. We're going to bring those products back into this country. Those trade policies, as much as any other set of policies, has resulted in the shrinking of the American middle class. And I'll tell you what else it did. It's not only job loss by the millions, it is the race to the bottom, so that new jobs in manufacturing, in some cases today, pay 50% less than they did 20 years ago. How stupid is that trade policy?
Well,
Secretary Clinton.
You know, if we're going to argue about the 1990s instead of talking about the future, which I'd much prefer because I think every election is about the future, and you all deserve to know what we will do to help you have a brighter future. But if we are going to talk about the 1990s, I think it's only fair to say that at the end of the 1990s, after 2 terms of my husband's presidency, the unemployment rate in Michigan was 4.4%. There had been a net increase of 54,000 manufacturing jobs. There had been a net increase of 653,000 jobs overall. And one of the ways jobs were brought to and grown here in Michigan was through something called the Export-Import Bank, which helped a lot of businesses, particularly small businesses, be able to export around the world. Senator Sanders opposes that. I think we're in a race for exports. I think China, Germany, everybody else supports their businesses. Here in Michigan, there's been $11 billion in recent years used to support exports, primarily from small businesses. I favor that. He's opposed it. I want to do everything I can for us to compete and win in the global economy.
Sanders, just one more. I just want to explain,
as president.
I just want to explain to viewers what the Export-Import Bank is, in case everybody is not quite as wonkish as all of us on the stage here. The Export-Import Bank, it's a federal agency. It gives loans to companies that export American products. Senator Sanders, you do oppose it. The vast majority of the bank's customers are small businesses, 176 right here in Michigan. What do you say to small business owners who rely on the banks to make their companies profitable?
I'll tell you what I say. Do you know what the other name of the Export-Import Bank is, what it's called in Washington? It's called the Bank of Boeing, because Boeing itself gets 40% of the money discharged by the Export-Import Bank. 75% of the funds going from the federal government, the Export-Import Bank, goes to large, profitable corporations. Many of these corporations have shut down in America and have gone abroad to exploit poor people. You know what? I don't think it's a great idea for the American taxpayer to have to subsidize through corporate welfare profitable corporations who downsize in the United States of America. 75% of that money goes to large, profitable corporations.
Senator Sanders, though, you were the only member of the Democratic caucus to vote against it. You're agreeing with Senator Ted Cruz on this. Why is he right and the Democrats wrong?
Well, let me tell you, I don't want to break the bad news. Democrats are not always right. Democrats have often supported corporate welfare. Democrats have supported disastrous trade agreements. But on this issue, I do not believe in corporate welfare. And in fact, Secretary Clinton may know or not know that as a member of the Financial Services Committee, I work very hard and successfully to make sure that at least 20% of the money went to small businesses, which is where it should go, not to profitable corporations downsizing our country.
Secretary Clinton?
Well, when I traveled around the world on your behalf as Secretary of State, went to 112 countries, one thing I saw everywhere was how European countries, Asian countries were supporting their companies back in their countries to be able to make sales and contracts in a lot of the rest of the world. In fact, without the Export-Import Bank supporting businesses of all sizes, I believe more jobs would be lost here at home. More jobs literally would be exported. Instead of exporting products, we would be exporting jobs. I just believe that Senator Sanders, he took that lonely position because most of us who saw the results, I saw it as a senator from New York. Your senators saw it here in Michigan. They can give you the names of the 240 companies in Michigan that have been helped. There's a company in Livonia that is being helped. There's companies all over this state. And I know if we're going to compete and win in the global economy, we can't let every other country support their companies and we take a hands-off approach.
I'm going to let you respond. But I just want to push back on this. Senator Sanders is correct. The majority of this money from this bank does go to Boeing, goes to companies like Caterpillar. Do they really need this money?
I'll tell you what, Anderson. After I investigated it, I concluded that they did, and here's why. There are two big plane manufacturers in the world. There's Airbus and there's Boeing. Airbus does everything it can to get contracts to sell planes everywhere in the world. We don't have as quite an aggressive outreach from our government. I did go in many places around the world to sell American products because the alternatives were usually European, Asian, primarily Chinese products. That, to me, was an unacceptable concession. So, yes, Boeing and other big companies get support just like their competitors do from the companies that they are from in the countries that provide the support.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Sanders.
Isn't it tragic that these large multinational corporations making billions of dollars a year, shutting down in America, going to China, going to Mexico? Oh, absolutely, they need a handout from the American middle class. I don't think so. Second of all, Secretary Clinton has traveled the world. She's been to Europe. And let's talk about Europe versus the United States. I am sure that when you were in Europe, in France and Germany and the UK and all of the other countries, you noticed something. And that is every one of those countries guarantees health care to all of their people as a right. And I am sure you know, because I know you do, that in countries like the UK, compared to America, we're spending almost 3 times as much as they're spending in the UK for health care for our people. We're spending 50% more than the French. So when we talk about Europe and their pluses and minuses,
thank you, sir.
One thing they have done well that we should emulate, and that is guaranteed health care for all people through a Medicare for all.
Thank you, Senator
program.
Sanders. Secretary Clinton, 30 seconds, and I have to take a break, so 30 seconds if you can.
And we are on the path to doing that. Thanks to President Obama and the Affordable Care Act, we have 90% coverage. We are lacking 10%. We're going to stay on that path, and we're going to get to 100% universal coverage.
We have to take a break. We'll continue this discussion. We have a lot more to talk about. We're going to take a short break. We've got to more of the Democratic presidential debate from Flint, Michigan when we come back.